Philadelphia, Mississippi.
All right, good morning. Welcome in. Out of Bounds, driven by the Ram trucks and Jeep Wranglers, pre-owned and new. Mac Hike in Flowwood. Great group of dudes. MacHikeFlowwood.com. Show is also brought to you by Mississippi Sports Medicine and Orthopedic Center. We welcome in Steve Robertson, Hail State Insider, the Boneyard Podcast, 247 Sports, genespage.com. Steve was in College Station as Mississippi State pulls an upset and played some really good football. So, Steve, let's start on the offensive side of the football. How about the red zone, taking advantage of driving the ball in the red zone and going 3 touchdowns and a field goal where they had struggled? They really generated some points. There were several other differences in the game, but that was the one that jumped out at me. Your thoughts? We may not have Steve. That was compelling. Live in the Bank Plus studio, Out of Bounds, 105.9 The Zone. All right, we'll try to get Steve back up and running here in a second. Mississippi State wins 26-22 on Saturday, and Will Rogers had a night with 408 yards passing, 3 touchdowns for the young sophomore. Steve, what did you make of them going 4 for 4 in the red zone with 3 TDs and a field goal?
Well, I think technically it's 4 for 5, you know.
All right, we're going to get Steve in the next segment. We're having a little issue there. But Will Rogers talked about the game. And, you know, he was kind of the MVP of the weekend. He's the toast of the town this week in Mississippi, young QB out of Brandon, Mississippi. He had caught a lot of Blake grief from the fan base, which I didn't understand as a true freshman and a true sophomore working through all the new stuff that they're doing. And yet he has come up time and time again, I think, in big moments. I mean, La Tech should have lost that game. This is Will Rogers after the game talking about his team and Mississippi State.
I think the program's going in the right direction, and tonight was a huge step for that. I feel like we've been close the past 2 weeks. I mean, we're 2 plays away from being 5-0. But, you know, it is what it is. We left those games behind us, and we came out on the road in front of 100,000 people, and we won a tough road game in the SEC. So, you know, if our own fans don't want to cheer for us when we're losing, then don't cheer for us when we win. That's my take on things.
Will Rogers, postgame. Here's what I'll say about Will. First of all, that was a shot at some of the people who have questioned them early on in his career as a true freshman and true sophomore. You know what my takeaway was, Blake? They play for him. And I know that sounds simple.
Okay.
But that is a big deal in the game, especially when you're they play for him. And they like him.
Yep.
They like his approach to the game, his work ethic, and those offensive linemen and those everybody, they play for him, and there is something to that. And he's still super young, hasn't played a lot of games, was not the starter out of the gate last year. They tried to get KJ Costello up and running and healthy. It just never worked out. He eventually took over, thought he played well, gave him an opportunity against Georgia, gave him an opportunity against Ole Miss, you know, beat Missouri and Tulsa down the stretch. And you can tell that they like him.
Yes.
They play for him, and they believe in his work ethic and his preparation.
Yeah, it's a little bit of that elevation abstract that we've talked about before. Like we've mentioned Dak Prescott, Jake Mangum. I think even Bo Wallace at times was able to do this, where you're able to, you know, get people to do a little bit more than they realize they could do, right? you're able to just kind of bring someone up to a different level with your play and everything like that. And so I think Will is dynamic is not the right word, but he's a guy that will give 120% in every play. Even though you're like, why doesn't he run? That's not the point. It's not that type of effort. He's still giving effort. And like you said, he's still leading. And this is a tumultuous time in the program's history where you've gone through quick cycle of coaches. You've gone through how many quarterbacks have played over the last 4 years?
Oh, good
which
grief.
Which is a little like, even though they didn't have great QB play all through Dan's career, he had lots of long tenured starters.
Yeah, so you started with Fitzgerald with Moorhead, then you went to Tommy Stevens, then you went to Garrett Schrader, then you went to KJ Costello, then you went to Will Rogers. Yeah. You make a good point that you've rolled through a bunch of dudes.
Yeah, and sprinkle Keaton Thompson in there for like 3 games.
Right.
I mean, you've gone through a bunch of QB play. You need a little bit of stability.
Did you just reference the best coach in the history of Mississippi State and Greg Knox?
That's right, baby.
Okay.
1-0.
Right.
1,000 winning percentage.
Wow.
Bowl champion. You needed stability from not just an on the field play side, but from a emotional locker room leadership. I mean, what have we talked about? A culture is such an easy trigger word in sports, but there's been a lack of player-led accountability in the locker room since Mullen left.
You haven't had it since Fitzgerald.
And I would argue that this is
and he really wasn't
Yeah.
a super leader, but he was a hell of a football player that gave max effort Monday type stuff every weekend and got the hell beat out of him, and that spoke to the other players, Blake.
Correct.
So since then, we just went through all the players. What he's doing is, Will Rogers for our listeners, is he's growing up right in front of you. He's making some big plays. He's going to make all these guys. Tom Brady last night for the better part of that game. Tom Brady with all those weapons looked ordinary and frustrated at his age.
Oh yeah.
With 7 Super Bowls. But he stayed the course. Will Rogers, you know what else jumped out at me? Was his pocket awareness. He's still young. He's still working there, man. He got better, and Saturday night, he stayed in the pocket, kept his eyes downfield for that another half second to second, and made some wonderful throws to receivers who caught some very difficult balls down the field that kept moving the chains in a big way.
I think this was the best, and Cole Kublik kind of said this yesterday or Saturday. All the days run together. Saturday after the game, where he said, "This is what the air raid is supposed to look like."
Right.
I agree. It's a low level of what it can still be much better and much more efficient. And you can, instead of score 26, you can score 46. But this was the best put together offensive game, I think, from Mississippi State under the Mike Leach era. That includes the LSU game, because what
and
LSU,
the Missouri last year.
What LSU and Pelini did is such an anomaly of defense. You're never going to see that opportunity.
And can I say this? Malik Heath, I don't know if he'll take his COVID year and come back, Blake.
Oh, it would be smart of him to.
It would be. But I made dumb decisions. A lot of these kids will not do that. Malik, even though Polk and Wally at times and Calvin at times have had some kind of, they've caught a bunch of ball, whatever. I know Austin's not going to break it for 40 yards. But you kind of get the sense that if Malik Heath will hang in there because of his physical strength and he can make people miss. Yep. He ran right through that Texas A&M guy. We're watching the game right now after he caught the pass. If he hangs around, stays the course, and can stay on the team, he could be special next year with Will as a junior.
He also looks like the best high point catcher.
Yes.
And so going into the end zone, he's already made 1 or 2 against NC State but he's missed a couple close ones too. You'd like to see that develop too.
He's close. I don't know if he'll hang around, but he is really close. Bank Plus Friday Night Lights Player of the Week coming up next. We're going to try to get Steve Robertson again at 9:40.